And as a young assistant, your job is mainly in the field. It's your responsibility to make sure that the leaf reaches flat properly as you do the entire process of making fertilizer application, pest and disease operations, and the other operations, cultural practices that go with it are carried out in a timely manner. And the leaf is harvested and sent to the factory. Once the factory gets the leaf, it then becomes the responsibility of the factory and the staff to make sure that it is manufactured in the style that is required as per the end user.
Welcome to another show of My First Job, the podcast. We've had 26 episodes so far, each a different career trajectory, and today is no different. All of us have our morning cup of coffee. We choose the brand we like. We have certain preferences for how we love our coffee or tea. Today's guest is a connoisseur. He's a man with a tremendous amount of experience in managing large tea estates, not just in India, but in Laos and Papua New Guinea. Ramesh Vasudevan has had a wonderful career managing and navigating the entire process of tea making, including tasting. So let's speak to him and find out what happened in this wonderful journey of his. Hi, Ramesh.
Hi, Venu.
Wonderful to have you on the show. I'm sure that there are so many experiences that you can tell us about that will be completely new to a whole lot of the listeners of the show.
Thank you so much, Venu.
I'm not asking you for the brand, but do you start your morning with a cup of tea?
Actually, I don't. I start with a cup of coffee. I must be honest. And if I said my first question is not right. So actually, I do start with a cup of coffee. I'm equally partial towards both. I do drink my tea in the evening. I prefer a good cup of Darjeeling in the evening. I start the day with a good cup of Arabica coffee. It charges the batteries immediately.
No, the reason I asked is because for most of us, it's just a morning ritual. But for you, it's much more than a ritual. It was part of your career. Can you start from, let's say, college? Because that's the point at which most of us decide how we're going to embark on our careers.
That's correct, Venu. Actually, I had no clue about the existence of plantations per se. I studied in Ferguson College in Pune. I was very keen on economics. The college had a very strong economics department. I was pursuing my master's in economics at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics as well. That's when I visited an estate down in South India. Having come onto the estate, I was taken up with the lifestyle and I was taken up with the absolute peace, tranquility, the ability to go to play games in the evening. It seemed just the right lifestyle for me. The only other similar lifestyle would have been the services. I was very keen on joining the services too. In fact, I did join. I did my exam, the Combined Defense Services exams, where I got through the whole thing, but ultimately made a choice and said I would join plantations. So at the age of 20, I joined a company called Malayalam Plantations. It was a British company down south, based out of Cochin. Had plantations in Kerala and in Tamil Nadu. That's how I got into planting.
So, what are the first things that you are doing when you join? What happens? What are the jobs that you're, asked to do?
The whole process is pretty demanding because you had to go through a written exam. You had to make sure that there are quite few guys who are probably keen to get into planting. There was a written exam, and after that, there was an extended interview where we were sent to the plantations. The successful candidates were sent into the plantations to spend a couple of days in the plantations. You would be observed by the manager of the plantations to see whether you're capable of being a fit for the lifestyle there. So it was virtually, at that time, I'm talking nearly 40 years ago, it was a 360-degree sort of interview where you were observed from all angles to see whether you would be a right fit. So it was your background, is your ability to comprehend the requirements of the job. What you decided was not the only important thing, but also what others thought about you was important. So ultimately, if the manager felt that you were capable, you were then given the go-ahead and sent back to the company in Cochin, and they would then let you know whether you are successful or not. And being successful, you're posted as a young assistant manager to one of the plantations. I started my career in a state called Mayfield in the Nilgiris. My manager was a no-nonsense, a hard taskmaster, extremely fair, extremely firm, but extremely fair. And I learned a lot from him because he showed me how things should be done in a manner that is, which held no biases, but at the same time made sure that you did it the right way, despite the consequences that came your.
I want to understand, as an assistant manager, what would a normal day be like?
I would start the day, get up around 5:30 in the morning. By 6, I would be down at what they call the muster. The muster is where the workers of the divisions of the estates would gather and they would be allotted work. You then went down there and stood along with the staff, the officers who ran the plantations, and allocated work to various workers. Then after that, went down to the factory where manufacture would be on, spend some time in the factory, and then got home for breakfast. You would then spend time in the estate of itself and do what was required. Every minute of the day was busy. You hardly had any time to, actually spend on anything else except work. It's a hard day's work. And learning and working together were was a task by itself. So you had to learn rope very fast because the workers were looking at you and saying, well, if this young man is going to be the one who's going to be telling me how our work must be done, let's see what he knows about it. And there was this instance, there's a practice called pruning, where you prune a tea bush. The bushes in South India are basically in the age of about, say, 100 to 125 years old. And they're all massive bushes which have been pruned to keep them to the level that they are. And this is a 4-year practice where you prune the bushes, be able to point out the faults in pruning, flaws that come into it when you went to the field. I remember I was given a knife and told by the manager, please go and start pruning. And in a matter of 15 days, I would like you to make sure that you know your pruning and you will finish the task. There was, I think, 200 bushes of completed. I did that and I finished my pruning and I was very proud about it. And the manager came up to me and said, after 15 days, and asked me, have you done the task? I said, yes. He had one look at it and he called the supervisor over and asked him, what do you think about his pruning? He looked around, he shuffled and he looked down. He said, no, be honest. What do you think should be done? He said, if you ask me, I think he should be charge sheeted. So it just made me realize that it's very, very easy to supervise people when you don't have to do the job. It's when you actually have to do the job and when you need to do it well that you realize how difficult it is, how simple this job may. So that was a learning that stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I still continue to say that, if you want to ask someone to do a job, make sure that you know how to do it yourself.
So when you first had your experience of the estate plantation, that was like the trailer. But the main film was quite different from you thought it would be about plain buildings, but you discovered that it's a
absolutely. The working in a plantation is a totally different aspect altogether. There are so many cultural practices. There are so many things that go into making that simple cup of tea or coffee that we have in the morning. In a tea estate, you have to pluck the tea leaf. You have to put the tea, like I told you, the bushes in South India are probably 120 years old. And you really need to pluck the tea in the right time. You have to make sure that the quality of the tea.
Why is that? Why is it that they ask, people pluck it early in the mornings, or is there a time when this?
It's plucked throughout the day, but there is a particular interval of time between the plucking of leaves. So every bush has to be plucked every 12 days to make sure 10 to 12 days in order to make sure that the quality of the green leaf is retained. It is there that you have the theoflavins and theorubins, which actually impart the flavor and the strength of these teas. So it is the duty of the field staff to ensure that the raw material that comes to the factory is of optimum quality. And as a young assistant, your job is mainly in the field. It's your responsibility to make sure that the leaf reaches flat properly as you do the entire process of making fertilizer application, pest and disease operations, and the other operations, cultural practices that go with it are carried out in a timely manner. And the leaf is harvested and sent to the factory. Once the factory gets the leaf, it then becomes the responsibility of the factory and the staff to make sure that it is manufactured in the style that is required as per the end user. Now, in India, you have two different types of teas. You have the orthodox manufacture and you have the CTC manufacture. The orthodox is what you get, which is basically the older style of manufacture, which involves the rolling tables where tea is withered, and there's a process called withering, wherein you remove the surface moisture as well as the moisture from the leaf, and it is brought to an optimum moisture percentage. The leaf is brought to optimum moisture percentage, and then it is rolled. And once it is rolled, it is of this process of oxidation, what they call fermentation, that takes place, and then it is dried. There's a process by using fire dryers. That is the orthodox way of doing. The CTC is called CTC, stands for crush, tear, and curl. They're basically circular rollers which have got teeth on them, and the leaf is passed through the macerators basically. So you pass the leaf through it, and it macerates the tea, and it comes out the other end. And then there's a similar process of fermentation and drying. Once the fermentation and drying is done, it then goes in for grading and sorting, where you get the different types of grades. You have the leaf grades, and then you get the dust. The leaf grades are of lighter liquor, and the dust grades are of stronger. This is very basically it's very basic that I'm talking about. But if you go to it in detail, there would be a lot of other nuances which could be explored. That's really good. Bring that for another day.
That's the amazing part, I think, of every career. The basics can be learned in about 6 months to a year. The nuances take a lifetime.
Absolutely.
So, because there are so many things about. So, I just wanted to understand when you said cultural practices.
Yeah, would depend, like, say, the pest and disease practice. Tea is very prone to pests. You have the sucking pests, and then you have the stem bud, they have borers, which are pests. So you need to address this by using the right type of pesticides and the right type of fungicides, and in the right dosages and in a timely manner. You need to prune the bush. You need to make sure that the bushes are tipped at a particular height. You need to regulate the shade in the tea estates, because the shade makes a lot of difference in the growth and the amount of the growth of the tea plant, and as well as the tea leaf is dependent upon the shade. So in South India, for example, we use extensive amount of shade, but in certain other places, shade is not used at all, depending on how close you are to the equator and how far away you are. It make a lot of difference, and also your elevation. All this makes a difference as far as the type of leaf, and you try to grow. And these are the cultural practices that really go into it. Basically, handling of tea.
So you had a lot of walking to do on a daily basis. It was, I can imagine that.
One of the charm of the job was that you were given a Enfield motorcycle. That I didn't realize that the motorcycle was supposed to be parked on the road, and you had to do a lot of walking after that. So yes, there was a lot. There was a lot of walk. There was a lot of walking to be done. The bike could be polished and kept, and you walk everywhere. And if God forbid you are caught using the bike for anything else, except for going home or here. So yes, the motorcycle was there, and it's only later on that you started using the bike to go to various work spots. But then you did actually have to walk a lot. Yes, extensive work. And I can relate a very hilarious, when you talk about walking. It was this evening after work. It was around 6 o'clock in the evening, and I still remember the master didn't have electricity, and it was office. And I had just finished the work in the evening. It was dusk, and I was getting back, and the motorcycle wasn't there. But motorcycle was parked at the bungalow, because I was told I needed to walk. So I was walking up, and then I take a shortcut through one of the tea fields. I took the shortcut, and I took a bend, and there was a brown bear. They had to grow at one of the ant hills. I looked at the bear, and ran in the opposite direction. The bear looked at me and ran in the opposite directions. We didn't see each other. We hadn't met each other after that. But I'm sure both of us are scared which. Yes, these sort of adventures did come our way. And I found a leopard cub in one of the fields, and the forest department is not very happy that I was keeping it in the estate, and we had to hand it over. We ultimately did, and I don't know what happened to it. I hope that it survived. There were a lot of panthers and there were a lot of leopards, a lot of wildlife on these estates at that time. I'm sure it's still there, but at that time it's still pretty wild.
It was a lot. Okay. Your early schooling and all that, was it in an urban set?
I studied, yes. I studied in Loyola in Pune, and it's basically an urban setting. But my father was an instructor at the National Defense Academy at the NDA. And so I was exposed to a lot of a semi-rural life too at the NDA, because the campus was out there in Karakwasla. Beautiful place to grow up. We had the best of both worlds, not being in the NDA, but living in the NDA. And then coming to school, I did my schooling at the National Defense, at Loyola and Pune.
No, the reason I ask is that, typically these two worlds are almost, to put it, like a cliche, they're worlds apart. So to get used to life in a plantation, to figure out what this thing is a very different lifestyle from what the urban kids are used to today. So do you find that is one of the things where is recruitment an issue for today's plantations, or it continues to be just like before? There is a set of people who come.
You hit the nail on the head. The life in the plantations is very different. There is a lot of isolation. The ability to work and be isolated from all the lights of the city is something that's very difficult for kids who haven't really experienced this sort of lifestyle. And it becomes even more difficult once you get married and if your spouse is not used to this sort of life. And a lot of it does get difficult for the girls, because living on the plantations can be extremely lonely. I was fortunate because Lakshmi, my wife, was a planter's daughter, and she was able to adjust very well.
What the life was like.
Yeah, she knew what the life was. And though she often tells me that never ever think that it's an excuse that you can get away with. And it's made sure that it's always important that we had a break, went out, went back to places that we could see a movie, probably go to a restaurant. All those sort of things are very, very important. So we were lucky in that way, but there are certain places where it could be very, very isolated, and especially in the rubber estates, which are far more isolated than tea estate. The company that I worked with, I started my plantation career, Malayan Plantations, basically both tea and rubber plantations. The tea estates were much more closer to town, had much better social life because there were clubs, and one went to the club quite frequently, maybe once a week. But in the rubber estates, there were no clubs close by, and could get very, very lonely and gloomy. So yeah.
So how would you get past? What was your normal? Would you get down to reading? What is it that would happen to spend?
100%. A voracious reader. I read a lot of books, and books were a lifeline. And we travel miles to borrow books from each other. And one of the biggest things that you could give as a gift to any planter would be a set of books, however old they may be. And often what planters did is when they were transferred out, a lot of them left their old books behind in the bungalow itself, so that the incoming guy could read most of those. And these clubs also had libraries. So it was very much, it was definitely alive. It was much later that the TV came, and we were able to actually afford a TV. I still remember my first black and white 14-inch TV, which had very grainy, sort of reception pictures, yes, and watching the World Cup football without knowing who was scoring what goal, except for the night to come and say he did that. sure who was scoring the goal. So it was that sort of an existence. It was a tough life, but nevertheless, it had its own.
Yeah. No, and at some point, I think it's a not that you get used to it, but you discover your ways around it. You discover the compensations. Like you said, for most people, going into forest would be a break. And for you, getting into an urban environment would be a break. So it's
So true. So true.
it's just like a flip of the whole coin.
So true. Leave for us, we look forward to going on leave and not going anywhere near a hill station or anything of that sort. Be right in the middle of Pune. My parents were in Pune, so you would come to Pune and be right there in the middle of town, and still people. That was a break for us. Yes,
Great. So how long were you at Harrison Malayalam, and what happened next?
I was with them for 18 years. Vin. I continued to be with them for 18 years. I started as an assistant, and I left as a manager, as a senior manager. I was my last estate was an estate called Wentworth, which was in the Nilgiris, and I left from there. I was on that estate for almost 7 years, and it had both tea and coffee. And it was one of the prized properties of the company, and I spent good 7 years there. We had the good fortune of being chosen at the best estate for the best performances, and we were recognized by the company for this effort. And it's all entirely due to the excellent effort of the team that I had. Wonderful bunch of assistant managers and workers who went the extra mile to make sure that we achieved our tasks and we achieved our goals, and made the sort of financial targets that were set by the company.
That was it. So, how would you handle, let's say, a lot of these people working hard? It's hard labor, there's a lot of work to be done. How do you keep motivational levels high? And do you remember any particular ways, points at which you knew that you had to manage situations which had cropped up suddenly?
Yes, when we had to have an incentive system, and we had introduced incentive systems at various levels, right from the worker level to executive level. There were incentive systems that were introduced, and for high performers, there were incentives that were being given. For workers, depending upon the extra number of kilos that they are plucking or picking, there was incentives that were given to them. So yes, you have to incentivize. Otherwise, there is bound to be a very you would find that work level standard of work would be extremely ordinary rather than extraordinary. So in order to get the extraordinary out of people, incentivization is absolutely essential.
Okay. So, let's go to your experience in Papua New Guinea and Laos, which I think were worlds apart from wherever you started in Harrison's Malayalam, new countries, and then we'll come to, let's take it there.
Yes. So like I said, I worked with them. I worked with Harrison's Malayalam plantations. Then later on, it became Harrison's Malayalam till 2000, and then I left for New Guinea, greener pastures. And there was this company called WR Carpenters. It's at that time considered to be one of the better, or shall you say, top planting companies in the world. And they operated out of New Guinea and in the highlands of New Guinea. And New Guinea is probably the second largest island in the world after Australia, divided into two parts. One part is the Indonesian part, which is Irinjaya, and the other part is New Guinea. So it's similar people, a country divided right in the middle by the so-called colonial powers, very similar to what happened between India and Pakistan. A line was drawn and said, okay, this part is Indonesia and this part is New Guinea. So a partition actually took place there. So you have this partition that took place. And New Guinea is a wonderful country. It's minerally extremely rich. It has probably one of the biggest deposits of gold, copper. It's got oil and gas. You have every big miner in the world operating in New Guinea. And it also produces fantastic tea, coffee. The high-grown coffees of New Guinea rate the top coffees in the world. The company that I work with, Carpenters, at one time, our coffees were rated in the top 10 coffees in the world. And that is a matter of great pride as far as the company went. And the brand that I talk about is called Sigri Coffee. And the cup that I'm holding here is the Sigri Coffee cup. Well, it's a lot of memories, good memories that come with it. So yes. So New Guinea was a country that had 800 different languages, 800 different and warring tribes.
How do people manage to communicate?
Well, there were three basic languages that was used in New Guinea. One was Motu, that was used in the coastal areas and the islands. Then you had Pidgin, Tokpisin, as they was called, that was used in the highlands and in the other areas. And then you had English, which is the universal language that's used everywhere. So I had to learn Pidgin, and I learned it very fast, because if you didn't learn Pidgin, you couldn't manage with your. So and when I joined this company, Carpenters had this very firm policy. You could come from any company in the world, but when you started right at the bottom. You had to start from the factory. So and they said the Indians in particular had this enormous talent of writing wonderful CVs. So so
That's a very backhanded compliment.
but if we take it both ways. So nevertheless, the general manager was a tough old Scotsman who told me that, well, if you have to start, the bottom is where you start, and then you rise upwards. You prove yourself, and you could head the company someday. Well, I'm happy to say I started at the bottom, but I actually headed the company one day. And I ended up as the general manager of WR Carpenters in a matter of 10 years. And when I ran the company, I ran WR Carpenters.
You created a harvester there, right? You were not mechanically inclined earlier, but how did that happen?
Yes, that's interesting. This company was one of the pioneers of mechanical harvesting. Harvesting, as we know, is normally plucked. You find everywhere in the world people pluck wheat in their hands, and it was a laborious process. In New Guinea, you didn't have the labor to pluck the tea. You had the tea, you could grow the tea, but you didn't have the labor to pluck it. So you had to mechanize, and the area was flat. So therefore, it lent itself to mechanization. So there was already a process of mechanization that took place, and they had already introduced early harvesters in the beginning. By the time I went there, they were using 3-man harvesters. And I was keen on developing something that would be more mechanical, would be track-driven. And I found an old piece of junk lying in one of the workshops in one of the estates. And I set about, actually literally taking the cobwebs off it and pushed it out into the light of day, and then looked at it and found that it was an old wreck that required a lot of work. So I had a good mechanic, a bush mechanic as we call them there, who set about doing something, and we put this whole thing together, mounted an old tractor motor onto it, took the blades off these 3-man harvesters, assembled the whole thing. It was a mishmash of all sort of stuff that you could find, put everything together, and tried it out. The first day, the engine actually fired. That was great joy. And then the harvester actually moved. The hydraulics moved. So it worked. So, and then the blades worked. Getting the blades to work and to synchronize the speeds of the blades, we required pulleys. We got all that going. It was something that was, I think, good, glorious to watch. And as it felt, it is a great achievement. The board was very, very appreciative of the effort made, and we tried it out in the field, and it actually ran, much to the pleasure of some of the supporters and much to the displeasure of a lot of others. But it's actually ran well. We then decided that we will go on for better harvesters, because we decided that is the way forward. And I spent a little bit of time in Japan my general manager at that time was a South African gentleman who took me along, and we went to Japan, and we spent some time there understanding how the Japanese work on these. They're masters, the masters of tea harvesting with the Japanese. Japanese have small garden tea estates and are completely mechanized, and they have wonderful machines that work there. So we went there to learn how they did it and devised a machine that was useful for us. And they understood our requirements, worked with us, and ultimately developed a couple of machines that we've used in New Guinea. They bought the first 5 machines when I was there, and we actually got them working. And it was a pleasure to see these machines work because they cut labor costs by a tremendous amount, increased productivity, and improved quality. So all in all, a win-win for everyone. So so it was very good. So they got these machines going, and ultimately, by actually fabricating an old harvester, I was able to get these machines back on the estates, and it went a long way in actually mechanizing the whole process.
So that was literally your test run. And then you figured out how to
get on for it and do it. Yes. And New Guinea grew, like I was mentioning before, New Guinea had both tea and coffee. And we had the states, which in India, if you look at it, tea and coffee don't grow next to each other. Normally, coffees are in a different region altogether and tea in a different region. But there, almost every estate that the carpenters had a coffee division and a tea division. And so one learned coffee along with your tea. And that was a great learning experience for me because I didn't have much coffee experience. But I learned the coffee from there. And I learned the nuances of growing coffee, then later on even tasting coffee. Here in Carpenters, they had the system of, a tea tasting session would be held almost every Thursday. And it was there that I really picked up the art of, learned how to taste teas, because it is essential that you tasted not only the tea that you made, but you tasted all the teas others made too. So it was all managed.
Can I just hold you back to, sort of get you into the flow? So when you're making the tea, are different grades of tea made in exactly the same way? How is it that you would assess 10 varieties of tea, for example, or grades?
Yeah, actually, tea, the process till your drying is the same, because the grading actually takes place after drying when you sort the tea. Depending upon the size of the granule or the leaf, it is then graded into various types, like you say, OP, orange pekoe, BOP, broken orange pekoe. Then you have FBOP, flowery broken orange pekoe, and so on and so forth. Depending upon the size of the grade, you would then grade the teas accordingly. And the dust grades would be the smallest of the lot. So you had dust grades like Dust 1, SFD, Special Fine Dust. It is actually the same tea, but broken down depending upon the size of the tea particle you were able.
And the dust is
smaller the particle, the dusts are much stronger. The leaf grades are more flavorsome.
So how would you assess what is it that when you drink tea that is made, how do you manage to differentiate between their minute variations, right? Or are they fairly strong variations?
There are a lot of variations, Venu. In the tasting, there are 3 processes. What you have to do when you look at a cup of tea, this one is the appearance.
Color of the liquor.
The tea leaf itself. You look at the tea, you first look at the appearance of the tea. They twist in the color, the blackish, brownish, the twist in the tea, the amount of tips. You look at the appearance. Then once it is infused, you nose it. Just a minute. This is an infusion cup. You infuse your teas in this for tasting. And once you taste it, you smell it. You nose it. To see, when you nose it, you're able to get a practiced nose will be able to detect whether it's been fired, or it's over-fired, under-fired, whether there's something different in the make and things like that from your nose itself.
Sorry, what is firing? What does firing mean?
Firing means when you're drying your teas, you're firing your teas, you're drying your teas at a temperature of about 120 degrees, right? So 120 to 150 degrees when you fire it. If you over-fire it, then you have burned, the teas get burnt. So then you will find fire in your teas. You will have a fiery taste in your teas, that burnt taste. So that burnt taste you can get out of when you do this nil palate. So that is when you nose it. So when you nose it, you get this, that's straight away. And once that's done, you're able to get an idea as to whether it's been fired. So that itself is an inkling as to what you're going to find in the cup. So the next thing that you do is you take a cup. It's a cup. This is a tasting cup.
Okay.
This is a tasting cup. This is a tasting cup. So your liquor goes into this. And from here, you taste your teas. You roll the teas in your mouth. Okay. From when during doing this process, what happens is you roll the teas on your tongue, on both sides of the tongue, and you're able to get the idea of whether the teas possess the qualities they're supposed to have. Basically, is it over fermented? Is it over fired? Is it pleasant? Is it got fruity? And what sort of flavor is it? Has it got a fragrance which people decide flowery fragrance. There were all sort of terminology that is used in it. But basically, that's what it's all about. Basically, you have to have a good nose, you have to have a good tongue and palate in order to tongue it and to nose it and to tongue it. Very, very important. Your palate is very important. So that's the nuances. So it only comes with practice, and you should be gifted enough to get that idea as to how you can differentiate between one tea. And that comes with hundreds of tasting hundreds of. So we should taste these things every week. And I know we should taste our own teas and others' teas also. And if you're in the factory, you would be tasting teas day in and day out. You'll be tasting teas to see whether the quality is being retained.
Okay. So typically a tasting session would last for how long? How many teas would you?
At a tasting, it depends on the number of cups that you put out. You would probably have about, say, 50 cups, 40 to 50 cups that put out. Say, 10 cups per estate, and some 5 estates, about 50 cups are put out. So, like I said, there are 50 cups like this, which are available, and you would taste each of these cups. And the art is to pick out the best of the lot and the poor ones. And you would say, this is good, this is not good, not that good. And there are certain qualities that you look for. There are optimal tea. So this is essentially an art that makes a lot of difference, because your pricing of the tea depends on these qualities.
Right. Absolutely.
So because if you're able to point out a tea that is excellent, the pricing of that tea would be exceptional in the auctions. All these tea go to auctions, and they're auctions, and these teas are auctioned. So they have the tasting reports. They're able to understand these are the tasting reports. This is what they say. So naturally, they will be able to find out and say that
how blends happen, in the sense that if you are blending certain types of tea, how is this entire thing managed at the back end?
See, blending is essentially the process that goes into trying to get a mixture between quality and quantity. See, in tea, what you require is cuppage. For the normal tea, the guy who makes tea, the tea shop guys here, they're only the chai kada or the shops as we call, or the tea shops on the roadsides that we have that we see, are all dependent maximum number of cups that they can get from one teaspoon of tea. So for them, cuppage is important. Flavor is not important. So strength and cuppage is important. Now, blending is when you take flavor and you take strength and you blend both of them together both best of both of them. So you would find that all the packaged teas, you find the 250 gram packets or 40 gram or 100 gram packets, like you find the red labels and the 3 roses and this various things that you find are all blends. They're all blends of various types of teas that are made. In fact, some of our teas from New Guinea were coming to Cochin for blending. They were coming all the way from New Guinea to South India to blend in some of the blends that were being used by a major tea, probably the biggest tea company in India, because they were wanting that particular color which the New Guinea tea had and the Indian teas didn't. So all this goes into the blends: the color of the tea, the strength of the tea, the flavor of the tea, the cups that you can get, all that. So all that goes into making a favorable blend. And they have a very intricate sheet called the blend sheet. So in the blend sheet, the guy who's doing the blend master will write what is the type of tea, how much of that should be blended, and how much should be, and what is the process of blending also that has to.
And how would you keep this consistent? Because the crop nature is not something that will give you exactly the same flavor profile each time. Climatic conditions, all of this. So, how do you maintain consistency based on a previous tasting?
That is where quality management comes into being. When we try to maintain to the maximum extent, there's a consistent quality in the tea. You have to do that. Otherwise, you would find that there's a huge variation that takes place. However, it is recognized for a fact that in a place like, say, Darjeeling, the first flush, Darjeeling first flush and the second flush, that is, they have 3 or 4 types of, they have the first flush, they have the second flush, then they have the autumnal flush, and then they have the monsoon flush. Now, the first flush and the second flush is where there is maximum demand because the best teas are made, Darjeeling teas are made at that particular time. Whereas in Assam, it is the second flush that is much in demand because that's the best teas that they make. In South India, we are fortunate that we don't have those sort of the differences that take place. It's more or less we are basically a CTC sort of a segment that we cater to, the market that we cater to, and so we don't have that sort of quality demands as in, say, Darjeeling or maybe Assam. So that's a difference there.
And your own palate in the last 30, 40 years of tasting, what is it that you like and what is it that you intensely dislike?
Well, what I like about it is that tasting a good tea is always a wonderful experience. In the sense that the flavor that you get out of tasting a good tea or good coffee is something very unique. It's like tasting good wine. It's something very, very different, and you're very appreciative of the fact that you're able to identify from where this tea came from, which of the estates it come. No, each estate or sea has a different. Yes, it has a different. It has a different sort of a. It has a different sort of a taste. It has a different sort of a character, which is not found in other estates. So you're able to. And that's when you are able to say that yes, this is the estate because it's on a high elevation. It produces this sort of a tea, and and you're able to come to some sort of a concrete sort of a judgment on the type of quality that a particular estate produces. That's when you know that you're good enough to qualify as someone who knows something about tea. So that's a good part of tea. The bad part is that you have to go very often get your teeth clean because you stain your teeth a lot with the tea tasting.
That's one thing. Oh, so that's a fairly regular practice to have your teeth.
No, what I'm saying is it stains your teeth. You often what happens is people think that you're a smoker. I used to smoke, but I don't smoke anymore. But when you're tasting, it does stain your tea. So you do have this as an issue.
Wow, that was 20 minutes of wonderful education. Ramesh, thank you, because I think it was a wonderful way of understanding what exactly is involved in tasting, because we see it from the outside, but to have an insider view and get to know exactly what went through the process is fascinating. You mentioned briefly that there's a difference between coffee tasting and tea tasting. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, basically coffee comes from the main two types of coffee that we grow are the Arabicas and the Robustas. And Arabicas are basically the higher grown Arabicas, and the Robustas are grown at lower elevations. Robustas are coffees that basically which are drunk by people who like a strong cup of coffee without much flavor. Arabicas have a more sort of flavor, more flavorsome. And in Arabica, you have astringency, you have better acidity in the Arabicas on your palate as compared to the Robustas. So in coffee tasting, you have to, again, nosing is a very, very important because there's a tendency for the coffee bean to get fermented. It is only in the nose that you're able to actually make out whether there's a hint of fermentation or fermentation that has taken place in your coffee bean. That could lend a more undesirable taint to the coffee. So that's one of the things that you find in.
Couple of questions, Ramesh. I think you can see it
What's the difference between an Indian chai and green tea? Is the base leaf the same? Well, the base leaf is the same. Indian chai is basically black tea, and what you find in green tea is actually also the same leaf, but it's a different process of manufacture. Green tea is basically a process where there is direct firing of the leaf after rolling. There is no fermentation process, and it just goes directly either steamed or fired, and green tea is made. Whereas in Indian chai or black tea, as we know it, there is a process of fermentation and then firing it. That's where the difference comes.
Okay, great. And do you have to sort of clear your palate, or you can just move from one cup to the other? How does it work?
We not actually, before you start, you clean your palate and then you keep tasting. You don't have to
You don't do it intermittently. Oh, okay, great. So I think from Papua New Guinea, you then moved to Laos, which you said was another amazing experience. So what do you tell us about that?
yeah, actually, yes. Laos is a wonderful country. It's a landlocked country which has the Mekong River flowing through it, and it's in the neighborhood of Vietnam and Cambodia, part of the old what they called French Indochina. A small country, a communist. It's currently it is a seclusive communist country where they still almost very similar to North Korea in their functioning, and they are a country that have got enormous, again, a country that's got enormous menu resources, a country which has got a lot of natural resources, and are currently known as the battery of the East because they have produced a lot of electricity from hydroelectricity and hydroelectric plants on the Mekong. So I was I worked with the Birla Group, the Aditya Birla Group in Laos. I was heading a greenfield project in Laos, which was involved in planting genetically modified eucalyptus in order to raise eucalyptus for extraction of alpha cellulose in order to make pulp. Aditya Birla Group are the world's largest producers of pulp and fiber. That is used in the manufacture of viscose fiber, which, as you know, viscose is used in the shirts and the dress material and stuff like that. So they're putting out this huge plantation of 50,000 hectares in Laos, and they asked me whether I would be interested in heading this project, and I was given the opportunity to do that. And I joined them and was there for about 3 years with the project. And it was a different experience altogether. Nothing to do with tea or coffee, but that's where I had a great experience as far as forestry went. Laos was the most bombed country in the world. During the Vietnam War, the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran through Laos. The North Vietnamese, the canny North Vietnamese fighters had a trail which ran through North Vietnam. McNamara, who was their secretary of war that time, had drawn a parallel across the 17th parallel and said, no North Vietnamese will ever cross this. And he had barricaded the whole place, dug trenches, mined the whole place. But yet they found that the North Vietnamese were taking a detour through Laos and coming back into South Vietnam and playing havoc with the Americans as well as the South Vietnamese. So the Americans were bombed the daylight side of Laos. And they did that from various air bases that they had in Ireland, Russia, and elsewhere. So the amount of armament that they dropped over Laos is huge. And at one time, every 9 minutes, one bombing sortie was going with Laos. So it is probably one of the most bombed countries in the world. So once all this was over and 30 years apart was down the line, the government of Laos was very keen in getting
fresh investments.
Getting fresh investments. And the Aditya Birla Group were keen on finding land to grow their plantations. So they were giving us, this project was started off, and we were involved in finding new land for to plant these plantations. So we had a massive multi-million plant nursery that was put up very close to the Thai border, in a place called Savannakhet, and they were supplying plants to various parts where government of Laos has given us land. One of the problems that we are finding was that the land that was being given to us was contaminated land. It was contaminated by UXOs, unexploded ordnance. Now, ordnance was basically in the form of cluster bomblets. When a cluster bomb is left loose, it releases what they call bomblets. It's bomblets of this size, and they fall. There are numerous which are spread all over the place. They may not explode then. A lot of them explode then, but a lot of them explode even later after coming in contact, either animals or humans, leading to terrible injuries to people and often death to a lot of. So we were finding that this is one of the major problems that we had, and we had to actually do this clearing of this land in a very cautious manner, and had to actually make sure that our people were protected. And we planted out. By the time I left from there, we had planted nearly about 20,000 hectares of land. But subsequently, I'm told that the project was the guerrillas disinvested and sold the project to some of the Chinese investors, as the word I was told. But nevertheless, Laos was a wonderful country, beautiful place, and worth a visit if all you ever go that side there. Wonderful country.
Okay, wow, that's quite a life, Ramesh. How would you? We've almost spent an hour. So what I would like to know is, how is it that you have? What is it that you would like to tell young people who want to take the beaten track, or what is it that they need to be prepared for if they're looking for a career in plantations and forestry?
Well, plantations and forestry is very rewarding if you're interested, if you are keen on the outdoors, if you're keen on making sure that you are contributing to the environment. It's an exceedingly rewarding experience to work in to contribute to making sure that your carbon footprint is being cut down by, instead of adding to the carbon footprint that we all do in most other professions, you're reducing it in places like the plantations. And also, you have endless cups of tea and coffee to taste. It's a great experience
Okay, I think the tasting, there's one last question, which the question is there something you are not allowed to eat and drink if you're a tea taster from Pearl Tawari?
Well, if you want to be a taster, it's preferred that you don't smoke, and you must have a good palate. So it's better that excessive consumption of alcohol also would go a long way. So those would be the two. But otherwise, everything else is quite normal.
Great. Thank you so much, Ramesh. Any concluding thoughts? Anything that you wish to leave the listeners with?
Well, all I can say is now you know that first cup of coffee or tea that you have in the morning, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And there's a lot of experience from a large number of people working in the plantations who go into making that. Bring it. Cheers. And
cheers. Thank you for taking the time. It's been such a wonderful session listening to you and getting to know more of this. Thank you for your time, Ramesh, and thank you for such a vivid illustration of what life is like on a plantation and what is it that you've got to be prepared for if you want to take up a career in this field. Thank you.
My pleasure entirely, Reno. Thank you for having me on the show.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was Ramesh Vasudevan. Another different profession, that of tea tasting, and across countries, and in Laos and in Papua New Guinea, apart from Harrison's Malayalam, which is where he started off. This was another wonderful journey, and we'll bring more such journeys. Please remember to subscribe, and like I said, next time, subscribe now, hit the bell icon, and thank you to my entire team who's been helping me with this, through Deepa and LPS Jayachandran, for all the work that they do week after week. Thank you. Until next time.